God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV. God is bigger than the boogeyman, and he's watching out for you, and he's watching out for me. Shout out to the theologians, Junior Asparagus, Bob the Tomato, and Larry the Cucumber for those bars. If you know, you know. If you don't know, I'm about to tell you. A long time ago in a veggie land far away, there was a little child vegetable named Junior Asparagus who was terrified of going to bed because he thought monsters were hiding in his closet because he had just watched a scary movie called Franken-Celery. And so what does Junior Asparagus do? Anybody know this one, right? He runs over to his parents to tell them that he's afraid that there are monsters who are hiding in his closet, and his parents reminded him of something that I want to remind you of this morning. His parents reminded him that compared to all of the things that are scaring him and all of the things that are keeping him up at night and all of the things that are giving him anxiety, his God is so much more powerful and so much more bigger. That's right, I said more bigger. I know that's not good grammar, but I'm not taking it back because I think it is such an understatement to simply say that the breather of galaxies is big. No, he's not just big. He's so much more bigger than anything you and I could ever fathom or ever imagine. He's so big that the Bible tells us that it's going to take all of eternity for us to wrap our hands around the bigness of God. And it's not even going to be enough. Right? I think it was Francis Chan who once said, it was so good. He said, isn't it good to serve a God that you can't exaggerate his greatness? I mean, come on now, that'll preach. Right? How amazing is it that we are here today to worship a God who you, even if you tried your best, you cannot exaggerate his greatness. Here's the big idea in case some of you decide that you're going to peace out or fall asleep before this sermon is over. I'm going to just serve it to you right up the beginning. It is that your God, our God, the Hebrew God of the Bible named Yahweh, he is so much bigger than you have ever dared to believe. And not only is he bigger than you've dared to believe, but I am convinced that a healthy dose of how big he is the perfect prescription for all of the anxiety and the worry and the fears that many of us came in the room with today. I know nobody probably led a conversation with that, but a room this size, I'm guessing that there's some of you who didn't sleep last night. I'm guessing that there's some of you who cried on the way to church this morning. I'm guessing there's some of you who are like, man, those few moments where we're singing that song, that's the only reprieve I've had in a really, really long time. And I just want to propose for your consideration this morning that what you need the most is not a self-help sermon or a self-motivational sermon or 10 things to do to improve your life. I want to submit to you this morning that what you and I desperately need the most, maybe more than anything else, is a revelation of how big and great our God is. Because the bigger our revelation of God is, the smaller our problems tend to be. God is bigger than you could ever imagine. And he's watching out for you and me. Maybe this is one of those things that I probably should have had this conversation, Amy, a lot earlier in the Revelation series. But just in case those of you who have been around for this conversation haven't picked it up, aside from Revelation being a prophetic and apocalyptic letter that's hard for our Western minds to understand, aside from that, an argument could be made that the single greatest reason why Revelation is the most difficult book for us to read in 2025 is because Revelation is the revelation of a God who is so much bigger than we could ever think, fathom, or imagine. And I don't know if you've thought about this before, but it makes sense when you read certain parts of Revelation that it doesn't make sense. It makes sense because it's the revelation of a Most High God. And so if you're just joining us in the conversation, we're in like chapter 16 of this really intense, amazing books, right? And we've seen all kinds of crazy things happening. And there's so many parts of Revelation that we don't really understand, if we're being honest. right? Like chapter 15 and 16, where God is pouring out his wrath on the world. You guys, I was the one up here preaching the sermon. I'm going, I don't know. Some of this doesn't really make any sense. Right? If you have a Bible, if you own a Bible, I hope you brought it with you, by the way. If you brought your Bible with you, that's awesome. It's the coolest. Everybody else is doing it. We're trying to normalize bringing Bibles to church. If you do not own a Bible, listen, there's nothing that will make us happier than to give you a Bible at the Connect counter. This is the greatest phenomenal ever printed. There's no book like this in the history of the world. It's the most accurate book that's ever written. It's the most true book that's ever been written. Even people who don't believe in God would agree that this is one of the greatest books that's ever written. So we'd love to give you one for free. But if you're just joining us for the first time, I just want to encourage you, when you have time, the last time I said there was no sporting event going on Sunday, I guess the Masters was on. Thanks, Jim, for letting me know that. So I'm not going to say that again. But if you got nothing to do later today, go binge Volume 1 and Volume 2 of this series, because Revelation is not really one of those stories that you can just pop in and figure out what's going on. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Revelation is not like Hallmark movies. Anybody love Hallmark movies in here? My wife loves them. She gets annoyed because I love to walk in 15 minutes into the movie. I'm like, let me guess the plot. I think I know, right? I bet I can guess it. The city girl is driving through the village. She has a flat tire, and the six-pack cowboy dude comes and fixes her tire, and now she's stuck in a snowstorm, and they're going to save the Christmas lighting tradition for that, whatever it is, and she's like, stop it. I'm like, nailed it, right? Listen, that's not Revelation. You can't just pop in 15 and 16 and go, I know what's going on. Revelation is one of those stories where the more time you spend in it, the more you're actually going to understand what is going on. And obviously, I'm not going to recap all 16 chapters that we've been through. But the long and short of it, just to catch you up to speed, is that Revelation is God unveiling for us things in the future, in the present, and in the past. And he's doing it through visions that John sees and hears. You guys remember we had this conversation a couple weeks ago, right? It's a bunch of visions. John's like, I saw this and I heard this. I saw this and I heard this. And so all through Revelation, John is seeing things and he's hearing things and he's telling us about it. And the most recent example of the vision that John saw that we talked about is in Revelation chapter 15 and chapter 16. If you have your Bible, the words are going to magically pop up on the screen behind me and beside me if you don't have a Bible. I'm not going to read like the whole thing, but basically John sees a vision of how the world's going to end, right? And it's God's final judgment. And John's vision of the end of the world in this specific part of Revelation is symbolized by 7 angels who are holding 7 golden, I don't know, does it actually say golden or did I just make that up? It's just bold. Okay, all right. Does it say golden, Amy, or am I making that up? She's like, you're making it up. All right, I love it. I caught it though, right? They're holding 7 bowls filled with God's wrath that's being poured out on earth. Revelation, remember, it's an apocalypse. And so there's a lot of symbolism, a lot of colors, and a lot of numbers. And so we see these 7 angels, and they've got these bowls, and it's the end of the world, and they're pouring out God's wrath on all evil and wickedness and sin. And if you weren't here when we did a deep dive in Revelation 15 and 16, you're going to want to read it a little bit later, but this story is every bit as devastating as you can imagine. And I just want to give you a little flyover just to kind of remind us or catch us up to speed in case you missed it. So the 7 angels, you guys tracking? It's the end of the world. They're coming. God's final judgment is coming on all evil and all wickedness, symbolized by these 7 bowls with the 7 angels. And it is devastating. Verse 2 says that the first angel went out and poured out his bowl on the land, and ugly, festering sores broke out on the people who had the mark of the beast and worship this image, right? These are the people who have given their allegiance to anything but Jesus. And the writer is telling us right here that those people are going to suffer a great deal when the wrath of God comes. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but if you skip ahead to, let's go to verse 8, right? The 4th angel poured out his bowl on the sun, and the sun was allowed to scorch people with fire. Again, remember, Revelation, symbolism. It's not any less severe, but the writer's letting us know that these people who, again, had refused God's offer of salvation. And we've seen this all through Revelation. God's going, hey, you don't have to be under my wrath. I said this before, right? I think it was Matt Chandler who said, no one has to be under the wrath of God except those who choose to be. So these aren't innocent bystanders, people who have aligned with anything other than Jesus. The writer says that they were seared by intense heat. They cursed the name of God who had control over these plagues, but they refused to repent and glorify him. You go to verse 10, and it gets even worse. The fifth angel poured his bowl out on the throne of the beast, and his kingdom was plunged into darkness. People, this is so graphic, gnawed their tongues in agony. They cursed the God of heaven because of their pains and their sores, but they refused to repent of what they had done. We go to the very end of chapter 16, and the writer tells us that from the sky, huge hailstones, each weighing about 40 kilograms, fell on people. And they cursed God on account of the plague because the plague was so terrible. Everybody take a deep breath in and out. Right? It's a lot. And I said this 3 weeks ago. I'm going to say it again because I think it's too important to mention only once in our conversation. But these stories about God's wrath, these agonizing, severe stories about God's judgment are not in the Bible because God is a sadist like Sid from Toy Story. Right? Remember Sid just like to burn the little toy? Like that's not why it's in here. And these stories are also not in the Bible because God is this ruthless, merciless being, like, if you don't like Toy Story, like the Joker. Anybody like Batman in here? Does anybody remember what Alfred said to Bruce when he was trying to explain why the Joker is not motivated by money or power in The Dark Knight? Right? Two nerds in the back. Anybody not against the back wall know what I'm talking about? What does he say? What did he say? There it is. Some people just like to watch the world burn. And I'm going to say the unspoken part out loud. I read Revelation 16 the other day, and for a second, I was like, is that what's going on in here? Like, is this, are we talking about a God? Is God just in heaven? Let's be honest now. Like, does he just like to watch the world burn? Like, is that what's going on in here? And we talked about this a few weeks ago, so you can catch up on YouTube. But the more you dig into the text, the more you realize that these texts aren't in there because God is in heaven going, man, I just want to see this thing implode. No, these texts are in there because God wants you and I to know that even though he is kind and merciful and patient and loving, he is also just and righteous and holy. And one day he's going to come back and he's going to do the thing that we've all been begging him to do all along. Dylan, you know what I realized the other day? I realized the other day that even people who don't believe in God agree that if there was a God who was all powerful and all loving, he would do something about the evil in the world. Right? I mean, I'm not going to require anybody to do it, but I'm guessing, I know I'm generalizing a little bit here, but if you're one of those people in the room who are like, I don't know if I believe in this God that you guys are talking about. Glad you're here, by the way. I love having you in the room. You're like my favorite person to have in the room. But my guess is that even you would agree that if there's a God and he's good and he's all powerful and he's all loving, he for sure needs to do something about the problem with evil and wickedness in the world. And here's what that tells me, okay? Forgive me if I'm overgeneralizing. What that tells me is that the problem that many of us have with texts like this is far less about the fact that God is choosing to judge the world and far more about how God is choosing to judge the world. Because I think 10 out of 10 would say, yeah, of course. 10 out of 10 would say, I don't want to live in a world where there's no hope of justice. The problem comes when God's like, all right, I'm going to come do the thing you've been wanting me to do all along. And we're like, yeah, but we don't really like how you're doing it. And I think if a lot of us are honest, that's what comes out when we read texts like Revelation 15 and 16. We read it and we're going, I don't know if the punishment fits the crime. Like we read it, we're like, that's a little intense. We read it and it just doesn't make sense to us that God would do that. And maybe this is one of those things that preachers like me need to say more often. But did you guys know that there's actually a lot of verses in the Bible that heavily suggests that it makes sense that God's plan don't make sense to us? I'm going to say that again for those in the cheap seats. We read the text and we go, I don't know, that doesn't really make sense to me that God who is loving and merciful would do that. Come to find out, there's a lot of verses in the Bible where God's going, just so you know, it makes sense that my ways don't make sense to you. Can I show you an example? I want to show you an example. It's a little snippet from a part of a letter that Paul wrote to the Romans, right, in the first century. And this little part of Romans is called the doxology. And so if you're in Revelation, I promise we'll come back to that. Listen, I know I've told you guys this before, but there's nothing I love more than seeing young people in the front with their Bibles open highlighting. That is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. Can we just give them a hand? Can we just Aaron, can we put their names on this seat? I will just this is so awesome. But keep your hand on Revelation chapter 15 for just a moment. I want to go to Romans, okay? And if you're not familiar with Romans is I always say, it's like a theological fire hose to your face. And so if you wake up tomorrow and you're like, I'm in need for some pain, just start reading Romans. It'll punch you in the face, in the gut, and then give you a hug at the end. It's amazing. But Paul is building these theological arguments, and it's so deep, and it's so intense. And in the middle of it, Paul has a little praise break. Anybody grew up in church where people had a little praise break, in the middle of that? Here you go. All right, all the white people are like, what is a praise break? Okay, ask your black friend later. They'll tell you. Okay, so Paul has a little bit of a praise break in the middle of this theological, powerhouse that he's building. And I want you to watch what he says. It's called the doxology. He says in Romans 11:33, Paul says this. He says, oh, the depth. Somebody say depth. Of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. I'm going to read it again, but this time I'm going to substitute God with Jesus. And the reason I want to do that is because you throw the word God out there and people think a million different things, and you can fill in the blank of who you think God is. But we know in the Bible that God is Jesus, right? Jesus is God. Jesus claimed to be God. That's why they try to kill him. And so Paul's talking about Jesus in here. So I'm going to read it, and I'll put the name of Jesus in here just to make sure we're all in the same zip code. Paul goes, oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of Jesus. I read this the other day. I got so excited because my mind immediately went to the Mariana Trench. Anybody know what the Mariana Trench is? Anybody know what I'm talking about? It is the deepest known part of the ocean. The key word, known. Which means, and I didn't know this, but I found this out last week, which means that there are depths to the ocean that we have yet to explore because we can. We don't know how. We can't get there. But of the depths of the ocean that we have explored, this trench supposedly is the deepest one, and it is 36,037 feet deep. Okay, not one person said amen. That's exciting. It's a good thing I came prepared. Okay, you ready for this? Let me put it in perspective for you. You ready for this? This trench is so deep. How deep is it, Sammy? It's so deep. If you took a rock and you dropped it, it would take an hour before it hit the ground. Okay, 3 people are impressed. That's awesome. This side of the room, not so much. But I came prepared. You ready for this? This trench is so deep. How deep is it, Sammy? Okay, the atmospheric pressure, they say, is the equivalent of taking 50 jumbo jets and stacking it on your head. I'll give you another one. This trench is so deep. How deep is it, Sammy? If you took, you guys are fun. I didn't think you guys are going to play along. I love it, okay? If you took Mount Everest and you threw it in the trench, it would still be underwater 6,000 feet. I'll give you another one, and this one has nothing actually to do with this specific trench. This is just the ocean as a whole. Did you guys know that fewer people have visited the trench, the deepest known trench in the ocean, than have visited the moon? Think about that. Fewer people have been down there than have been up there. And I bet you guys didn't know that we know far more about outer space than we do the depth of the ocean. Paul goes, yo, time out. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of Jesus. Do you guys see it, or you need me to break it down? If the smartest minds of our day can't figure out a way to explore the full depth of the ocean, what makes you think that you and I can fully explore the depths of the wisdom and the knowledge of a God that the prophet Isaiah says holds the waters of the world in the palm of his hands? We're going, wow, that trench is so deep. You could put Mount Everest in there and still have 6,000 feet. That's crazy. God's like, yeah, I'll get one better than that. I hold the waters of the world in the palm of my... Listen, I'm not trying to insult anybody's intelligence in here, but are you really that surprised that all of God's ways and God's plan doesn't make sense to you? Is it really, come on now, I know we're Americans and we can do anything we put our mind. Is it really that surprising? Because think about it. If God, again, some of you are still trying to figure out if you believe in God, but think about it. If the Hebrew God, Yahweh, if he is even half, okay, let's just cut it in half of what the Bible claims that he is, what makes more sense? A, you can fully comprehend and understand all of his ways and all of his plans? Or B, there are a lot of things that he's doing that doesn't make sense for you by virtue of the fact that you are a finite human being that couldn't wake yourself up this morning. What makes more sense, A or B? B, right? The answer is B. The answer, it makes sense that so much of the plans of a sovereign God doesn't make sense to us. Paul's like, oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of Jesus. How unsearchable his judgments, his path. I love this. Beyond tracing out. My wife and I took our kids to breakfast the other day, and not that there was ever any question, but within 3 seconds of sitting down, I'm like, those are my children. Their butts barely hit the seat, and they were competing to figure out who could finish the maze. You know the maze they have on the kids' menu? What you got to do? They're like, who's going to finish it first? And they're like, oh, I'm going to be first, you know? My wife's like, hey, not everything has to be a competition. I'm like, yeah, it does. I'm like, go, kids, go. Don't let the little one win. Come on. You're 7 years older than her. All right? But you know what I'm talking about? You know how you go to the kid, you know, your kids get the thing? You know what I'm talking about? Like and then you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Newsflash, none of us are smart enough to do that with God. That's what Paul is going like you think you're gonna go, okay, here's the God of the universe. Paul's like, really? He is they call him the Ancient of Days. He said, you can't search his judgment. You can't trace his path. He goes on. He says this. I love verse 34. He says, who has known the mind of God? Or who's been his counselor? Anybody in counseling here? I'm in counseling. Anybody got a life coach, therapist, right? I mean, we all. You know who doesn't need a counselor? You know who's never needed a therapist or a life coach? God. Listen, God has never needed a counseling because he's God. And when you're God, not needing counsel from anyone is a part of your job description. And so Paul's going, who's ever counseled God? You know what this means? This means that when you and I, and we do this all the time. You know that thing we do where, you know, we're on Twitter or maybe we're watching the news and we see something that we don't like happening in the world. And we're like, man, if I were God, I would just do X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm talking about? You know how anybody, come on now, help me out here. I hope I'm not alone. You ever just look at the world and think to yourself, man, if I were all powerful, all knowing God, I would just do. You know what God's not doing when you say that? I promise you, God's not in heaven going, wow, that is a great point. Can you say that slower? Let me pull up my notes app on my phone because I got to figure out. Hang on, everybody, hold on. I got to figure out. This is a great. Angels, come here. Gabriel, come here. Michael, come here. You know that puzzle we've been trying to solve for centuries? Guess who just figured it out? Bucky from Ohio. And the angel's like, what? Bucky? God's like, yeah. He failed the third grade 2 times. And God's like, I know. Isn't that crazy? Isn't it crazy that Bucky can't even figure out how to use a roundabout, but he just solved the problem of evil in the world? And we laugh, but listen, okay, I'm about to fire some shots, okay? There's some of you in the room, myself included, who think that you can play a better God than God, even though you still haven't figured out the proper use of your and your. I'm not going to name any names, but anytime my friend David Lenz texts anything, I have heartburn. I'm like, bro, you have broken, spell check can't even help you. I'm like, what is going on? Same thing with Aaron Kent. I'm like, what? Did you go to school? What in the world? This has nothing to do with the sermon, but this is so funny. Thank God for AI, okay? Because some of these guys have no hope without AI. Aaron Kent, I don't know where he is, sent me an email the other day, okay? And I could tell, because normally he sends me an email, and there's like 50 things I got to spell check in, and I'm like, bro, what is going on? Were you closing your eyes when you were texting me? But all of a sudden, that changed, and I'm like, wow, I wonder if he's using AI. Well, he sent me an email the other day, and the beginning it says, dear, parenthesis, recipient. Insert recipient name. I'm like, bro, if you're going to chat GPT and email to me, at least put my name in it. Like, I mean, think about it. Some of us can't even write an email without AI help. And we're looking at God going, man, I don't know if I like how you choose to run the universe. I mean, what is that? Is it pride? Is it delusion? Like, what is it that truly, again, I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence, but what is it that makes us think that we're going to counsel him? Okay, and if you're in the room and you don't believe in Jesus, you don't believe in God, okay, before you give yourself a pass out of this conversation, I got a question for you, okay? You're on the hot seat with the rest of us. Are you really going to dismiss Jesus because you don't fully understand how he does everything he's done? I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. They're like, I don't know, man. If there's a God, I just don't know if I can get with him because he did all these things. And I'm like, I can't say this to them, but I want to be like, really? You're going to dismiss him because it doesn't make sense to you? Think about it. If Jesus walked through those doors right now, and I'm not saying we should have questions. Jesus loves your questions. I talked about this on Easter, right? He welcomes your doubt and he welcomes your question. But just so you know, if Jesus walked through those doors right now and gave you all of the answers to every question you have, number one, your mind would not have the capacity to comprehend it. And number two, you would have nothing to add. It's not like God will be done and you're like, okay, I'm going to tell you where you messed up in there. Paul goes, who's known the mind of the Lord? Who has ever been his counselor? Who's ever given to God that God should repay him? You guys are like, what does this have to do with Revelation? I'm trying to give you a framework for how to process God's work through history. I'm trying to give you a framework for how you process God's work in your life. I'm trying to let you know that it makes sense when what God is doing doesn't make sense because he's God and we're not. And so he goes, who's ever given to God that God should repay him? You're like, I did. I went to camp and I put the little thing in the box and I sang a song and I served. God's like, really? Wow, that's awesome. You sang to me with the breath that I put in your lungs. Yay. Congratulations, you did nothing. That didn't come from me. Watch how he ends this. He's not saying that we don't get to play a part. That's not what Paul is saying. Paul is not saying you're just a random, inconsequential, incidental being in the universe. No. He's just putting it in perspective. He's like, just so you know, you ain't never giving God. God doesn't owe you. You're not going to get to heaven and God's going to be. I always think it's so funny, by the way, when people are like, when I get to heaven, I'm just going to stroll up to God and be like, I got 10 questions for you. I'm like, you sure about that? I think you will be on your face for probably 1,000 years. Guys, Paul's going, who's ever given to God? He's not saying you didn't play a part. He's just saying, just so you know, from him, through him, and for him are all things. From Jesus, through Jesus, and for Jesus are all things. To him, Jesus, be the glory, he says, forever and ever and ever and ever. Listen, I know this probably doesn't fit with our way of thinking in America, but I just need to tell you two things that might be hard for you to accept, but I promise it will change your life. Number one, you do not have the capacity to comprehend the full work and plans of God in history and in your life. It's not an insult. You're just a dude or a dudette. None of us have the capacity to comprehend the full counsel of the one who breeds galaxies. I'll give you another one. You ready for this one? This one's going to hurt a little bit, okay? God does not owe you an explanation. I know, that's so un-American, but I'm telling you right now, the God of the Bible, think about it. He's God. He doesn't owe you. He'll welcome your questions. He'll welcome your doubts. He'll draw closer to you if you're doubting him. Like we said last week, he'll go, look at my hands. Touch my hands, Thomas. But he does not owe you an explanation for how he chooses to run the universe because he's God. And we may not like that, but here's the thing. I think more of us understand it than we like to let on. And I'll prove it to you. How many parents are in the room? Show of hands if you're a parent, okay? Lots of parents. Keep your hand up as a parent if you feel obligated to explain everything you do to all your children all of the time. Keep your hand up if you feel like you owe it to your children to explain everything you do all of the time. That's what I thought. One hand kind of lingered a little bit, got me a little nervous. But come on, of course not, right? You understand that as a parent, number one, your kids they can't come. I mean, how many of you sat down with your kids like, let me tell you my 2025 taxes, okay? This is kind of crazy. Have you heard what's going on with the tariffs right now? This is kind of wild. My financial portfolio. Like, we don't do that with our kids, one, because we understand that they don't have the capacity to comprehend everything, why we're doing everything we do, even if we explained it. The other reason we don't do it is because we know that when kids are scared and uncertain and kids are asking us questions, what they need is not an explanation of how everything works. You guys know what I'm talking about? It's kind of like when it storms. This happens all the time. Anytime there's a thunderstorm, one of my kids is going to come in our room. Like they're going to come like, And I'm telling you guys, I'm so worried that one day this is going to happen and I'm going to accidentally say a word that pastors aren't allowed to say because it's just the weirdest thing in the world because here I am over, just sleeping peacefully and all of a sudden I open my eyes and there's somebody standing right there in my face at 2 a.m. Daddy, I'm scared. I'm scared. And now Daddy needs a minute to change his underwear. I'm like, don't do that. It's like, it's a kid just standing in your face. But you know what I don't do when my kids are in the storm and they're scared and they come wake me up? You know what I don't do? I don't go, oh, wow, Lola, you're scared of the storm? Oh, you know what? The real reason you're scared is because you don't really know how this works. So why don't you take a seat? Let me explain to you what's really going on. Because I think if you knew exactly, why storms are happening, then you wouldn't be scared. So let me learn you, okay? A thunderstorm is like nature's giant power show. Okay, you get it? All right, I know you're 5, but pay attention, okay? When warm, wet air rises to the sky, it cools down and forms big, tall clouds. Inside those clouds are tiny little bits of ice and water that bump into each other. Those bumps create electricity, just like when you rub your feet on carpet or shock someone else. But in the cloud, the electricity builds up bigger until, boom, it releases lightning. Lightning is the flash you see. It's pure energy shooting from the cloud to the ground, from cloud to cloud. Thunder is the sound that happens because lightning makes the air around it super hot, super fast, hotter than the surface of the sun. The air explodes outwards, and that explosion is what you hear as thunder. In short, the reason thunder sounds loud and rumbly is because waves are bouncing off clouds, buildings, and hills. The end. Please go to sleep now and never wake me up in the middle of a storm, because now you understand how thunderstorms work. Yeah, ChatGPT, that's right. That's right. Insert name right here, Right? But come on now, as parents, we instinctively know that when our kids are uneasy, when they're anxious, when they're asking questions, listen, what they need is not really an explanation of how everything works. No, what they need is reassurance from someone so much bigger than them that everything is going to be okay even when it doesn't feel like it, which brings us all the way back to Revelation chapter 15 and Revelation chapter 16. Is it possible, you guys, that all of the angst and all of the uncertainty and all of the discomfort that we feel when we read God's wrath is not going to be solved by a theologian or a pastor who is going to come up here and explain every single nuance of God's judgment? Is it possible that what you and I actually need more than that is reassurance from a God who is going, I am so much bigger than you could ever imagine. And I just need you to know that in spite of everything that's going on, you're going to be okay, even though it doesn't feel like it, even though it doesn't make any sense to you. Not sure if you guys picked this up or not, but isn't it interesting that when John began Revelation, I don't even have it on my slide, Revelation chapter 1, what's the first thing that John talks about? The glory of Jesus. Remember that? Literally, read it when you get home. Revelation 1, John sees Jesus and he's going, oh my God. Literally, his mind was blown. John fell to the ground as though dead. He's like, his feet were like bronze in fire. He said his face was shining like the sun in all his brilliance. He said he saw Jesus holding 7 stars in one hand. It's almost like John is making sure that you and I understand that all of Revelation is set on the backdrop of a God who is bigger than you could ever imagine. It's almost like John knows that we're going to read things in Revelation and we're going to go, it doesn't really make any sense. I don't really understand how that's supposed to work. And John's going, yes, it makes sense that it doesn't make sense because you are reading the revelation of a God who can hold 7 stars in his hand. And I don't know if you noticed or not when we read this 3 weeks ago, but I think it's so interesting that in right before John tells us about these 7 angels with 7 bowls of God's wrath, it's devastating, it's agonizing. But right before that, watch what he says in Revelation 15, verse 8. He says, and the temple, what temple? The temple he saw in verse 5 in heaven. It says the temple was filled with smoke from the, can you say that word with me, please? Glory of God, and from his, say with me, power. No one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were complete. So we're reading about God's wrath, and it's devastating, and we're going, it doesn't make sense. And John's going, I know it doesn't make sense, but I need you to understand that this is happening in the backdrop of a God who is so glorious that smoke from his glory filled the temple, and no one could go in. If you're a student of the Old Testament, the reason this sounds familiar to you is because we've seen this happen before. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I believe it's in Exodus chapter 40. In Exodus 40, Moses could not enter the tabernacle, I believe, because it says the glory of God descended like smoke. Think about this for a second. God's glory came down like smoke, and it was so weighty, Moses could not go in. Same thing happened in 1 Kings when Solomon brought the ark back. It says the glory of God came down like smoke, and the priests could not do their job. Like, imagine trying to go to your job and there's such a thickness of smoke and you're going, I can't even move. And I know the word glory is a pretty churchy word, but I heard this definition when I was in college a long time ago, and I've never been able to forget it. I don't even know who said it or give him credit, but it is so, so good. This is what God's glory is. God's glory is his intrinsic greatness or weightiness. It is his manifold majesty, his brilliance, his awesomeness. It is all of God's attributes to infinity in perfect balance. It is everything that God is. It's his greatness. I love that word, his weightiness. One of my favorite questions to ask when I was a college pastor was, how much does God weigh? How weighty? That's glory. Glory is the weight of God. And the writer says that when God put his weight on the temple, when the weight of God came down and his power, no one could enter. That's the backdrop of the wrath of God. It's a God that's big, it's a God that's powerful, and it's a God that's saying nothing is impossible for me. Listen, you guys, I know I've said this before. There's no way around the severity of the wrath of God, but I believe that there is a way through it, and that way demands that you and I do two things, again, that don't come natural to us. It demands that we acknowledge that we don't have the capacity to understand all the ways of God. And number two, it demands, or rather invites us to trust in a God who is so big and so mighty, even when what he's doing doesn't make sense. We can be confident knowing that he's in control. Isn't it interesting? God's so big, you're not always going to understand everything he's doing. But the good news is God's so big, you can trust him even when you don't understand everything that he's doing. Listen, I know this conversation is about the judgment of God, but just so you know, it doesn't stop with the judgment of God. This framework that I'm giving you this morning also applies to your life. So when everything is falling apart, when you're looking around, you're going, nothing makes sense. When you're looking around, you're going, where is God? Is there a God? He's obviously forgotten me. When you're looking at your life and all the evidence suggests to you that God is obviously not doing what he should be doing. The writers of the ancient texts invite you to trust in a God who is so big and so mighty. He's going, just because it doesn't make any sense to you doesn't mean that I am not at work. You can trust me. You can trust me when it doesn't make sense. You can trust me when it's falling apart. You can trust me when the numbers don't add up. You can trust me because I am rich in wisdom and I am rich in knowledge. I am the breather of stars and galaxies. You can trust me because I am big, and you can trust me because I am also good. He's not just big. He's good. And he's inviting us to find comfort in his greatness. I love the way the prophet Isaiah framed it. Okay, I'm going to read you one more text and I'll be done. Famous last words by preachers. When they say that, they're not going to really be done, but you know. But can I just read this to you? And please, I'm not going to read the whole thing. First service didn't even get this, and so that's how special you guys are. But watch this, Isaiah 40. All right? Read it when you get home. It's so good. But Isaiah is just painting a picture of how great God is. And a lot of us don't we get uncomfortable when God gets bigger, because when God gets bigger, we get smaller, and we don't really like that. I heard a preacher say once, I've said this a million times, he was talking about how great God is, and someone came up to him, and they're like, Pastor, you're making me feel small. And he's like, I wasn't trying to make you feel small. I was trying to let you know that you are small. We don't like thinking about a big, great God because it makes us feel small. But listen, you guys, this is where the comfort and the hope and the life lies. The more we embrace his greatness, the more we understand his love and his power for us. And so watch how Isaiah does it in Isaiah chapter 40. I'm going to just kind of jump around here, but listen to what the prophet Isaiah says in verse 12. This is what I did earlier. He says, who has measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, or with the breadth of his hand? God's just showing off right now, right? What a flex. He's like, I can measure the water of that ocean, whatever trench, I put it in the palm of my hand. He's like, I can measure the heavens with the breadth of my hand. We're going, wow, look at those galaxies. Guys, look at those galaxies. Who has measured? He says, who has held the dust of the earth in a basket, or weighed the mountains on a scale? Who can fathom the Spirit of God, or instruct the Lord as his counselor? Who did God consult to enlighten him? Who taught him the right way? Who was it that taught God knowledge, or showed him the path of understanding? Watch this. Surely, he says, the nations are like a drop in a bucket. Compared to God, the nations are like dust on scales. He weighs islands as though they were fine dust. Fast forward later. I love verse 18. I love when the Bible asks all these rhetorical questions that it already knows the answers to. To whom then will you compare God? What image are you going to liken him to? Verse 21, do you not know? I love this. Do you not know? Somebody in here, God is saying to you, do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. Its people, this is us right now, are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy, and he spreads it out like a tent to bring in. Verse 25, to whom God says, will you compare me? Who is my equal, says the Holy One? Lift up your eyes. Look to the heavens. Who created all of these? He brings out the stars one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. So he's going, God is big. He's huge. He's massive. And you're going, okay, that's great. But what about me? Isaiah's like, what about you? Watch this. Watch how he flips the script. He says, why do you then complain, Jacob? Put your name in there. Why do you complain, Sammy? Why do you say, Amy, my way is hidden from God? My cause is disregarded by. It's going, if he's that big, you think he doesn't see you? Watch this. He says, do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He doesn't grow tired or weary. His understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary, and he increases the power. Anybody weak in the room today? He's like, I got strength for you. He gives power to the weak. Even the youth grow tired and weary. Young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in this great God will renew their strengths. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. This is the invitation today. Woo! It is a great God who is going, I'm your Father. I got you. Jesus, will you show us your glory? Will you open our eyes to see you in the fullness of it? Lord, I just confess that I've spent way too much time magnifying my issues, magnifying the things that scare me, focusing on all the little things that are falling apart around me. And so I just pray, I just ask for your grace this morning. Will you just give us the grace to be able to shift our focus from all the issues and all the things happening around us to look up to heaven, to fix our eyes on you, the one who calls stars by name. Will you expand our view of you, God? Show us your glory. Help us to find comfort and peace in the hands of our Heavenly Father.